Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We have lots to talk about, and in Buffalo, Joe Yurden is joining us. In Buffalo, it is Joy. It is a little overzealous Joy, I have to say. When I'm driving after the game on Saturday at around 11:15, 11:30 to get something to eat because I couldn't bear to eat anything during watching that game. People saved up their stockpile from July 4th and were lighting off fireworks. Give me a friggin' break.
I hate that because of my dogs. I do.
Yeah, the neighborhood dogs were not loving it. I could hear lots of barking, like the barks of just like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah,
kind of barks. I mean, listen, if there was ever a doubt before that whether this was a Bills or a Sabres town, it's a Bills town. Like,
wait, there's a doubt?
Yeah, I mean, well, they were both really bad. I always said that whoever ran out in front first and was able to get in the playoffs and make a run, they can make a claim. But that the Bills did it first made it pretty easy to make the call. But it was something else. I mean, you can see it building after they won the first round against Indy, and I could hear people honking and everything. I was like, okay, what happens next week if they win? And then they put the game at 8:15. I was like, oh boy, it's going to be a late night. And they pulled that one out and played really well. So next Sunday, if they're able to pull one out on Kansas City, man, this city's, oh geez, it's like I tweeted out after the game. I said, imagine what the city would be like if the bars were open. I mean, everybody's already lit and going crazy. I can't imagine.
Well, Mike Harrington, our colleague, tweeted something that I think is in the back of the mind of everybody in Buffalo. That the Bills' luck would be that they get to the Super Bowl and they have to play Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. Because the Super Bowl is in Tampa Bay. It would be the most karmically cleansing thing if the Bills could finally beat Brady, but it would just be their luck that they would go against the guy who's had them for 20 years, and in the end, that's who they lose to. But
they still have to beat the Chiefs, Mike.
No. I don't give me. I am not.
They're sticking voodoo doll pins in Patrick Mahomes right now to make sure Chad Henne starts.
Even if Mahomes isn't there, that's going to be a close game.
Yeah, but
the Chiefs have a way better, well-rounded team than most think, and they had no chance to prepare for Henne in that game, and Henne still made that great run at 3rd and 14. Like, the Chiefs have a lot of weapons. They do. And
but they're a much different team, obviously, without Mahomes.
I mean, anybody's different.
I'm just saying, obviously. So, in terms of the odds changing, they'll be
closer odds
if Mahomes doesn't play.
The defense of the Chiefs is better than any defense that the Bills have faced currently.
Russ, I think the Chiefs are favored. I think the Chiefs are going to win. I'm just saying. I mean, if Mahomes having a concussion and some sort of foot injury may slow him down, may make it a more even contest. But I favor Kansas City in that match. This is the thing. It's like with the Bills, like with the Browns, you have to expect the worst to happen. And yesterday in that Kansas City-Cleveland game, I didn't think Cleveland had a chance. And in the end, Joe, that play at the end of the first half where Higgins fumbles the ball through the end zone for a touchback, the difference in the score was 5 points. That was the difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can pin that on the difference. You can also say they punted away their season at the end. They made that gutsy call initially to go for it on 4th down to keep the drive going when they were at their own 30. And then they advance another 10, 15, 20 yards. They're at midfield and they decide to punt there. And it's like, you just burned off clock to get you to that point. Why are you deciding to punt there? I mean, if you gave them the ball at the 30, the game's over. You give them the ball at the 50, the game's over.
Yeah.
So,
it's 4th and 1 is a lot different, obviously, than 4th and 9, right? I mean, also, Butker kept them in the game by missing an extra point and a field goal. Mm-hmm. That changed also a lot of the game. 2 field goals, right? But one, the 33-yarder, and then obviously the extra point, which changed a substantive amount of how the game might have gone. Obviously, Higgins' fumble as well. Look,
but there wasn't even a fumble; it was a penalty, and it should have been a penalty.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was. It was.
I know it's a helmet to helmet that wasn't on the call, but unfortunately, it's not reviewable.
No, that's what we need to talk about because again, I think anything that's close to a scoring drive should be reviewable. I don't think there should be any rule that says it's not reviewable if it's something that affects the end zone. I don't know why.
A turnover would have been reviewable. Just a head to helmet is not a reviewable.
No, but I think anything that gets a player near the end zone, penalty or otherwise, should be reviewed because, again, a touchback is stupid in that case. When you're trying to explain football to somebody and you have to explain to them, yeah, they had the ball, but they lost it, and now it goes to the other team. That is a dumb rule, but I'll live with that rule. But the idea is the reviewable part. I mean, it's not like this is the first time something like this has happened, and this league hasn't changed it.
And the ironic thing is that in the Tampa Bay New Orleans game, it seemed like the officials in that game watched the first game because they called 2 helmet fouls that weren't even helmet fouls, and then they pulled back the flag. It's like, okay, you can't make up for the idiocy of.
But that's what they tried to do. Yeah,
but that's what they tried to do. So
that's a situation where you should be able to flag it initially, then discuss it.
Correct.
And then decide, okay, we can pick it up. If you don't flag it, then you can't discuss it. Like that.
But again, I mean, all right. So there's 3 refs on the field, 4, and nobody saw that. Nobody. Isn't there somebody positioned near the end zone? There has to be. Or how do you know if it's a touchdown? I mean, the refereeing was brutal, and even like the CBS guys even had to say something, even though they tried to say nothing. Boomer was probably the only one that wanted to say something.
Yeah.
The rest were reluctant. But the idea is, how do you have these important games that basically could mean the season, and again, we're getting these kinds of results? It's bad.
So now we have Brady and Aaron Rodgers in the NFC Championship game, Tampa Bay versus Green Bay, and then Buffalo, Kansas City is the later game on Sunday.
I still take Green Bay over.
Yeah, I think Green Bay is favored, Joe, but you cannot ignore the playoff magic that is Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's anxious to start counting out touchdown Tom. I mean, we've been hearing that stupid phrase forever, but
well, at least it's terrific.
Well, yeah. But I mean, if there's a team that shows a lot of strength but has weakness, it's Green Bay. Like, their defense is suspect. It has been for ages while Rodgers has been the quarterback. The one thing going for Green Bay is they don't have Mike McCarthy coaching them.
No, but you know what? They've been a lot of sacks lately, Joe, and that's the thing. Brady, he is a little susceptible to that. So I think that's one thing. And the Green Bay line is definitely top notch now. I mean, they could run the ball. And look, this is no slight or how I feel against Brady. Right now, Rodgers is just playing better. He just did.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, if there's one thing that the Giants in the Super Bowl against the Patriots showed, that is if you blitz Brady, no matter how good that team is, Brady freaks out.
Yeah.
So if you get in his face, you start getting, causing him disruption. I mean, he's not fleet of foot. He's gonna get trouble.
Remember when it was 2020? He was yelling at his guys. Like, things weren't going great. He was yelling at his guys for dropping the ball. Like, that's exactly right. That's what you should do.
Yeah. So I think it'll be 2 interesting games, and now we have to deal with the uncertainty and the build up for the next 4 or 5 days of, is Patrick Mahomes out of concussion protocol? Will Chad Henne start versus the? I mean, can you please?
Well, they're going to tell you Chad Henne's starting regardless. They're not going to tell you.
Sean McDermott is going to plan for Mahomes starting because Mahomes.
Of course, you have to.
Yeah,
but still, it's a big story, right? I mean, it also has a material impact on the line.
And you know what, though? I think this game is going to play out the way the one during the regular season did in Buffalo, where everybody expected a shootout. Everybody's expecting a 40-40 game. Both teams are going to slow play because neither team wants the other team's offense.
Right. It won't be
out on the field. No, it'll be a tighter game.
Yes.
And in the other game, I think conditions are going to matter, because if you get typical Green Bay weather, that favors the Packers. A quick field helps Tampa Bay a little bit, especially with Evans. And I'm trying to figure out who's covering Devontae Adams for Tampa Bay, because I don't know if there's anybody on that team that can match up with him.
I don't think so.
All right, Ak, we can start.
All right, let's do it. Let me get the date right. Here we go. All right. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, January 18th, 2021.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Jan Levine.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we are also joined today by the lovely and talented Joe Yerdon. Hello, Joe.
I can't remember last time I was called lovely. That may have been. Thank you.
Anytime. Yes. So we have a whole lot to talk about. I mean, just game after game after game. It's an interesting twists in games too. But I wrote a blog today, and I think it's a worth an interesting little debate here because Aaron Dell was picked up today by the New Jersey Devils.
Yes.
On waivers. Not a surprise. Everybody knew this was coming, right? The smart pickup.
Yeah.
But it got to me thinking, like, and I'm not including Dell in this group, but there's never been. I can't remember a time within like the last 20 years with so many young starting goalies in the NHL, like really young, like not young, but just like this is their first year playing as starters. Some of them are older, but some of them are really good. I mean, and really, this feels like, I mean, as a goalie myself, I always felt like we needed another wave of goalies. You know, we hadn't had one for a very long time, a really long time. Like when you think about like a super wave of goalies, like Carey Price, Brodeur, you know, like Hasek, like these kind of, I really think we might be under like the best goalie wave that we've seen in 25 years right now. And some of these guys are just exceptionally talented. And I got to think, who is the best of these guys? Like, we obviously saw, you guys know I've been, you know, obviously.
Yeah, your Sorokin for the
Ilya Sorokin thing is legendary. I know we got hung out to dry in what was a bizarre situation that we'll talk about.
Still have a couple of bad goals too, Ek. Don't give it all.
Oh no, that was bad. But you know, granted, you know, wasn't expecting to play, nerve-wracking, tough spot to be put into. But you know, there's a reason Barry Trotz wasn't going to play him because the Rangers were going to be hell-bent on revenge.
Wait, hold on.
Wait.
Now you are changing.
Come on.
100%. You told me it was going to be an even split. And as it turns out, it was an even split, even though he was thrust into action. And now you're telling me what I said all along, that Trotz was going to play Varlamov more in the regular season.
No.
When did you have this change?
You weren't going to sit Varlamov coming off a shutout anyway.
No.
Right.
You were going to play him regardless.
Right. So you're not going to sit him coming off a shutout.
In fact,
you just absolutely stopped.
Hold on. I'm sorry. It actually diffuses the pressure even more if you put the guy in like Varlamov gets hurt. Okay, Sorokin, you're in. You don't have time to really think about the pressure. You're just going to be in there, and he's an experienced 25-year-old goaltender. He's not some kid who just came off the VHL.
Right. No, granted. Okay, so let's
Thunder Bay.
In this list though, just like get off Sorokin for a second because I didn't include him. Because I'm just talking about, you know, you guys know I think he's a superstar, and I think he will be the starter by the end of the year. But I'm talking about guys that are starters now. Okay, guys that are absolutely the starters now. And I actually did include Linus Ullmark in that because I think that they're 1 and a 1A, and I'm going to give Linus that he's probably the starter pretty soon, right, Joe? I mean, he's like the guy.
Yeah, I didn't see a lot from Hutton in that first start.
Yeah.
That's been the story
I hate dogging on him because I do like Carter.
Yeah. Me too.
He's a good guy. We know that.
He's a great guy.
I mean, the facts are facts. Like, I mean, you know, the vision. I mean, he got his vision corrected, so I'm happy for that. But I mean, they got boat raced by the Caps, and you know, the one thing that stood out from the Sabres in those two games is that the defense still was strong in both of those games. The chances were, you know, the high danger chances were not there in either game, but yet, you know, a bunch of them found their way past Hutton. Allmark looked solid. I still want him to make that save on Vrana late that decided the game, but he's the guy, and it looks like he'll start tonight in Philadelphia. So
I'm really looking forward to seeing this Sabres team tonight in Philadelphia. By the way, I really am. It's going to be fun. So I have him as one of my guys, and I'll list you my guys that I have that I think are the starters I'm going to include in this because I went back and forth on a couple guys as how young they are technically, but I've got Mackenzie Blackwood, Igor Shesterkin, Tristan Jarry, who I'm still going to call the starter for now, even though he's been outplayed. In the first
please.
He's the starter, but he's
the starter, right? Okay, so no, I'm saying he's. What do you mean, please? I said he's the starter. Do you think he's not the starter, Mike?
No, he is the starter.
Okay, that's what I said.
There's no way in hell that a 29-year-old Casey DeSmith, who's a career backup, is going to unseat Tristan Jarry.
Well, he keeps giving up 4 goals a game.
Well, 2 more games like he had the first 2, and
it is possible, Mike.
7 goals and 90 shots, Mike.
I'm going to go with Ilya Samsonov as another one. Thatcher Demko, okay, who I think do we call him the starter or not? Is he?
It's a 1A 1B. I think
he's a 1A 1B. So he's on the edge. Elvis Merzlikson, another 1A 1B type situation, perhaps.
I think the couple
I didn't put Alex Georgiev in here. I put him in the same bracket as I put Ilya Sorokin, who are like the number 2, but with potential to be number 1 goalies in the NHL for sure.
A couple guys that are not on the list that I think belong on it. Cal Peterson from Los Angeles, who I think he had COVID, so he was not in the lineup the first couple games, but he'll get in there and he'll probably play, I'd say, 20 to 25 games for LA. And Kakkonen, the goalie for Minnesota, is definitely going to be getting a sizable portion of the starts between the pipes for Minnesota.
So they already promised the starter job to the other guy in Minnesota, so we know about that.
Oh yeah, but I think Kakkonen is going to get work.
Well, Stalock will be back before then, so I'm not sure yet.
So of all these goalies I've seen play so far, and it's really early sample size, obviously, and it's not fair to Shesterkin and because he got hung out to dry in that first game. Jarry got hung out. I mean, Jarry didn't look good, but honestly, I have not seen a worse.
No, Jarry has not looked good in either game.
No, I have not seen a worse defensive-looking team than the Penguins.
The defense is really bad, but he's looked bad as a result too.
Demko had a little bit of a rough start too, but and we know what he did last year. Carter Hart looked good.
Well, Joe
Blackwood has looked the best of any of them.
Blackwood looked great.
If you're just watching the game, if you've watched the 2 games Mackenzie Blackwood has played, he's been ridiculous. He won one game and then almost won the other game. In 63 and 65 shots, he stopped.
Let me ask Joe this, because in watching the opener of the Sabres and the Caps, I thought Samsonov was really shaky. And and last year I didn't pick up on that in the games that I saw him play. He played a sizable chunk for the Caps, and I think they were in a good position to have him be the number 1, but with a backup like Lundqvist to spell him. Now it's all on him. They brought in Craig Anderson as a disaster backup, and it appears they're going to go with him and Samsonov and Vanacek. But I think he's got to play like he did last year, and he looked really shaky. And apparently somebody in the chat said he didn't look that good against Pittsburgh yesterday. So.
Yeah, and he's interesting to me because of that injury he had at the end of last year.
Injury, we don't even know what it was.
Yeah, and we don't know what it was. And he's a guy that I think would have benefited from having a preseason. Honestly, that's somebody who I think probably needed a few of those games to kind of ease your way in. With the setup this year, nobody gets a chance to get eased in. You're just thrown right into the fire, and I think for him. Yeah, I'm high on him. I think he's going to be very good. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, goalies coming back from injuries that are serious. You got to give them a few starts. You got to let them get going. The only problem here is schedule's tight, and you don't have a lot of time. If you start burning games early and you drop a few of those, that could be a big difference.
Yeah, and now the other thing to think about, and this is like Binnington, Matt Murray. There's other levels. I mean, these are still young goalies. But they're still in this wave of goalies, in my opinion. But the really the first time starters in the NHL, when you've got about a third of your NHL that's first time starters, young in net, that's that I don't think we've seen in a very long time. And
well, one of the factors with this is the expansion draft, because a lot of these teams decided, okay, for example, Washington, they weren't going to re-sign Holtby because then they're going to have to expose either Holtby or Samsonov to Seattle. So they said, okay, a year early, we're going to go with the young goalie because we're going to protect him. We let Holtby go. And those kind of scenarios have sort of played out all over the place.
Yeah,
and I think the reason is because Seattle is going to have the pick of the litter when it comes to goalies in next July.
The one thing I want to say is I have to give the Devils credit, because when Blackwood came into the league, he was like a physical freak. He had maybe the best core strength in the league, but he lived off of that as a junior goalie. But then he was lacking some of the other things that goalies lack, a little bit of extra goalie IQ, things like that. And they worked with him deliberately for the last 2 seasons And you started to see results last year. Now you're really seeing them, and I give him a lot of credit for that.
He looks so friggin' solid. I mean, he's always in position. He's he's a calming type goalie, which is like he's not Brodeur, granted.
No.
But the thing that Brodeur always did for the Devils, which was calm the team down, Blackwood has the ability to do that to a degree, which is huge, especially with a young defense, right? So that's what you're starting to see Carter Hart in Philly a little bit too.
Other than Ty Smith, who's really young on that blue line. I mean, Vatanen hasn't come back yet. Subban's a veteran. Severson's a veteran.
It's true.
Murray, Ryan Murray.
Ryan Murray.
Not a young blue line. I mean,
it's more than just the blue line. It's a young team, I should say, because
it's a young forward.
Teams feed off the confidence they have in their goalie. It's just the bottom line is if you're not confident in your goalie, you're going to make stupid mistakes. You're not going to take chances on things. And that's definitely the case.
But Joe, the expectations for the Devils, I think, they can sort of float under the radar because everybody's picking them for 7th or 8th in that division.
Yeah, and I mean but honestly, that helps them out too because that team showing up on your schedule every night, you start thinking like, well, we got to worry about the Bruins, we got to worry about the Islanders, we got to worry about Washington or Pittsburgh or Philly. The Devils are the team on that schedule where you're thinking like, well, we can maybe ease back a little bit. We can take it a little easy. Well, if they go out and attack everybody, and you got Blackwood shutting the door. Suddenly, you got a team that's making your life miserable in those games. That's important for those teams that are kind of on that second half, the Rangers, the Sabres, teams like that, where you think, hey, maybe they can make a push and get in there. Well, maybe not if the Devils are going in and stealing points on you.
Yeah, I think the Devils are going to be a tough out all year. And really, the Islanders are showing that they are going to be. I mean, we had two different. Let's talk about the Islanders-Rangers games because they really were completely opposite games, obviously. And we talked a little bit about the first game, but let's get into this before. But let's get into the second game. What did you guys see in that one?
Well, let Jan go first, and then I'll go.
So you could tell that different Rangers were, and I'm not going to get. You guys can handle the D'Angelo piece of the puzzle. I'm just going to talk about they came out in a completely different mindset, and it was very apparent. 90 seconds into the game, turnover created by Zibanejad, boom, goal by Buchnevich, right? What you saw in the first game is the Rangers were on their heels a lot, that the Islanders were dictating the pace and not giving them any room, and the forecheck was horrific by New York in the first game, the Rangers. In the second game, they completely flipped the switch. They changed up the defensive pairings. You had Trouba end up changing up playing with Lindgren. You had Keandre Miller was a vastly different player, settled down by also playing by Brendan Smith. Completely different. Johnson actually played, I thought, fairly well in terms of playing with Adam Fox. Not great, but Fox obviously masked a lot of deficiencies that Johnson has. But what you did notice was that the offensive pairings, Panarin looked a lot more engaged. Strome was clearly a lot more engaged. You saw Lafreniere. They ended up moving Panarin to the right side on the second line as opposed to moving Lafreniere, which was originally rumored. I thought Filipino had a much better game. So what you saw was that the forecheck that was completely lacking in the first game, they ended up basically doing a 180 from what the Islanders did to them, and that ended up with flipping the switch was in essence the kind of format that they play with. And Georgiev was very good. He granted he got helped by 2 posts late that kept the shutout, but overall he was the calming influence between the pipes. Sucked up rebounds, didn't let up big rebounds, froze the puck when he had to, moved the puck when he had to, and also it was the big save. Like I said in the first game, Shesterkin, the 2-on-1, he had that play, it went off his glove. The goal by Barzal, he didn't come out high enough. It was a great shot, but he also didn't make the big save when he needed to make it. In the flip side, Georgiev in this game made that key save early on to keep the Rangers in the lead, and then they just ended up flowing from there.
Yeah, I think Quinn read them the riot act, and they definitely came out with their hair on fire. I think that was evident. I think D'Angelo taking that double minor and then still screaming from the box is what got him benched. And I think Quinn doesn't like that, and I don't blame him. And especially so early in the season, like you have to really, you got to cool it, especially how that game was going. So that was something. And then, I also think getting Kakko a goal was a big deal because he looked horrible. He had some really bad, just like listless kind of shifts in the first game. So getting him involved was a big deal. So, overall, it was a tale of 2 games for the Islanders and Rangers. I don't think either team is showing what their real team is yet because I don't think anybody in the NHL is in full game shape.
No, you really see it. You pointed it out in the chat in a text, Russ. And I was watching the second Flyers game Flyers Penguins game from home.
Yeah.
But when I was watching that game, you really saw as that game, the second game, wore on, that the defense, especially like killing penalties and things like that at the end, they just don't have.
The second period, both teams were just like, and that it wasn't a dead second period, but it was close to being a dead second period as a result.
If you don't take quick shifts, you're screwed. I mean, they really, if guys get hung out there too long, I mean, it's we always say, how can guys be so tired at the end of like a 90-second shift? Well, these guys are really tired at the end of.
They're always moving.
Yeah, they're really moving, and a minute shift. I mean, and I watching that, both those games, you saw that play. I also heard, of course, that the Barry Trotz like read the Islanders the riot act right before that game because he was so pissed off about Clutterbuck hurting Varlamov with a high shot in warmups.
Oh yeah,
and then he actually went on.
Well, the post game was interesting. He basically, without saying it, was basically like, guys, don't shoot high on the goalie. That's what he wanted
to say. It's an unwritten thing. And as a goalie, I would, as a goalie myself, I would get mad when people would shoot high on me in warm ups. But for him to get hurt like that, I heard right before they went out on the ice, the Islanders came out like dead, but they were just screamed at. Like basically, it felt like And I think Taratz kind of regretted how hard he went at them because they definitely came out.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, let me ask you this because it sort of puzzles me, the dynamic that's going on with the Sabres right now. You spend $9 million a year and on an 8-year deal for Jeff Skinner. He has a bad year last year, but he has a bad year because they primarily took him off the line with Eichel, put him on a second line, didn't have a center. Marcus Johansson is not a center. He struggles. He gets 14 goals. This year, Ralph Kruger, the same coach who moved him off the top line, has put him on the fourth line. I mean, he doesn't seem to be a discipline problem, but he's trying to get a guy who's 5'7" and 100 pounds to play a two-way game. He's a scorer. What the hell are you trying to make him into a two-way forward?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I think it's going to be an issue all year. With the guys getting bounced around with injury in the last game, Reinhart gets banged up. Hall took a puck in the mouth. Skinner got a little bit of time with Eichel in that game, and lo and behold, he looked fantastic.
Right.
And produced some opportunities. Didn't get a goal, but looked great. But this is the classic sort of old coach thing where you want to have balanced scoring on all your lines, which they almost have, except their bottom six is not. It's not an offensive group there. And now that they got Dylan Cousins playing with Eric Stahl, right. I think a lot of that offense is kind of gone from there. But ideally, you have Skinner, who's an even strength scoring monster. And you have him on a line with Lazar and
Riley
Shahan. And
there's nobody on the line with him.
They're not distributors. And unless Skinner's going to play in that Pavel Bure, hang in the neutral zone sort of role, which I don't think that's what Ralph Kruger has in mind.
No.
That's not really going to work out because he's not going to get the puck. Now, genuinely, if those guys do generate any opportunities in the offensive zone, he's going to be able to find his way around in the zone and hop on loose pucks and do what he does. But those guys aren't offensive producers. They're not shooters. They are there to muck it up with the other team. Shahan and Lazar can win faceoffs. They're there for defensive assignments, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
If I'm Kruger, actually, if I'm somebody else in the organization, namely the GM, Kevin Adams, I have to pull Kruger aside and say, listen, in Carolina, Skinner played with the best. He played with Stahl. He played with those guys. That's how you're going to get points out of him. So you know what? Put Taylor Hall on the second line. Taylor Hall signed a 1-year deal here. We have Skinner for the next, 6 years?
Russ,
He's going to have him scoring.
I thought the whole purpose of them trading for Eric Stahl was to put him with the guy.
I know, and they're not doing it.
7 years. We do a point counterpoint on this. I think that what Joe said was kind of – I also feel like this is an old school coach thing to show that no one is above the team type.
It doesn't matter. It's not going to work.
I don't think it's long term. I think that this is a situation where he's
you do it for 5 games in a 56-game season. It's longer term than you think, and it's just, to me, it's like Jeff Skinner is never going to play the defense that will make Ralph Kruger happy. So you better put him with your top 6 and you better figure it out quick, or you're not going to get points out of him again.
Isn't that the argument that you've had against all these other Sabres coaches who have just done that? Like, don't you want somebody to actually lay down the law?
No, not with. I mean, there's only so much you could do with certain guys. Are you going to pull Mario Lemieux aside and say, "Hey, Mario, we're going to drop you on the fourth line because we don't like the way you're sort of hanging in the middle of the ice there"? Are you going to do that?
Well, and Joe, Ralph Kruger has
he's $9 million and everything like that.
Ralph Kruger has been described as this Zen master, Buddha, a master of communication.
That is what he does. That is his thing.
Right, and with Skinner, it's being the exact opposite.
Right.
He's being the disciplinarian in high school with wrapping him on the finger with a ruler. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Yeah,
I to Ralph's credit, all the players have praised his ability to communicate, and Skinner knew Kruger was going to be the coach when he signed there. Right. So he knew it was up, and I'm sure he had guys telling him like, "Hey, this guy knows what's up." The thing with Ralph though is that for as great of a communicator as he is, and as much as you want to like what he's able to do, pushing buttons with making the right choices for the team, he's an old school minded guy. I mean, the work he's done with his team to make them a better defensive team, I know it doesn't show in the results, believe me. But if you look deeper at the shot numbers and the shot quality numbers and all that, he's done a really good job with that. The problem here is that it's come at the sacrifice of the offense. And that's the big issue Sabres have had issues scoring for the last, God knows how long. Right. And, you've got a bona fide scorer in Eichel. You've got a former MVP in Hall. You've got Skinner, who scored 40 the year before Ralph showed up. You've got these guys that can score. Eric Stahl can still produce very well for being a guy.
It seems like Kruger would break up the French Connection line if they had a couple of negative games. You know what I mean? Like, this is the side. Hey, Gilbert, you're a great skater, great scorer, but you got to play defense.
You guys are missing the point. I think what Joe was saying is absolutely.
I think what Joe's saying is right, but some players don't respond to it, and I think it's pretty clear.
Only a couple games. You're like 3 games.
No, but from last year he doesn't respond to it.
I know, but the whole point of this is the Sabres don't consider themselves a cup contender right now.
Right.
They got to build something. They've got to build this thing together. They got to make it. They got to build a team atmosphere, which they haven't had for years. And the reason that they keep going in circles is because they just put the guys who should score on the top 2 lines and leave it like that and see what and it doesn't work. And eventually, you have to. I don't know. I think like you saw, like Skinner shows up on the top line.
Well, and that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, he had an impact when he got back on there.
Well, there's a couple of things here at work for Buffalo. Skinner last year, he didn't score well, but he also matched his career worst shooting percentage. Mm-hmm. The shots were still there. The chances were still there. The puck didn't go in. Okay, that's fine. Right. And he did it mostly not playing with those guys. So you start thinking about that. But then you also have Victor Olofsson, who's tremendous on the power play. One of the best shots in the league on the power play. Yeah, he can't produce at 5-on-5, and he's become a bit of a defensive detriment at 5-on-5. So now you've got a guy that you just dropped $4 million a year on for the next couple of years to say, hey, he's a guy who's going to be able to score 30. Well, unless he's scoring 20 of them on the power play, I don't see how that's going to happen.
Right. We talked about that though. Him being such a power play dynamo. They probably really should have thought about that contract, knowing that this is what he produced last year. Like, it was obvious. It wasn't just a little blip.
It's getting to the point here, if this continues, that Jeff Skinner will be unprotected in the expansion draft, and they might give Seattle something to take him. It's a $9 million.
I'm not sure if he's got a no move clause or not. They might have to protect him.
I think he does, but he'd have to waive it. And based on what's going on right now, do you think he wouldn't waive it if he's going to continue to play 3rd, 4th line minutes when he was brought there and kept there to be the winger on Jack Eichel's line? If I'm Skinner and I'm his representation, I'm pissed off because you gave me the contract, and now all of a sudden here you're going to be a grave digger instead of something creative. That's what they have.
If I'm Ralph Kruger, but I'm not, and he's not me, I would pull Eric Stahl aside, and I'm saying, listen, I'm putting Skinner on your line, get him going. And that's exactly what I would do.
But Kruger's got a lot in his hands right now. He's got, you've got Skinner problems. You've got Olofsson, who can't score at even strength. And now you've got Dahlin, who looks slow out of the gate, and Brandon Montour seems to be an anchor on his side, which.
But he was an anchor last year.
Well, yeah, but that's a defensive pairing that you need to be playing a ton of minutes, and they're the least productive pairing they've got, and that's a big problem. So whatever he's doing with Dahlin, he's got to knock it off. honestly, because it's holding him back. And if he's overcoaching him, just stop. Just let him.
Yeah, I mean,
play how he needs to play.
There are some players, Joe, and Darlene is probably one of them, that you do kind of have to let him do what's innate and let him do his thing.
Yeah. No, and that he to me, I mean, you saw him, Phil Housley basically just said, "Hey kid, let's see what you got."
Right.
And he produced better than every 18-year-old since Phil Housley did in the 80s. So I mean, maybe just be okay with that. I understand not wanting him to get to a spot where he's basically like young Erik Karlsson and all he does is score points and not be responsible defensively. But at the other point, if you break down everything that he does well to create offense, to make your defense better, you're doing it completely wrong.
Yeah. Now, Eck, I wanted to bring this up because you mentioned Dell and that whole situation with him being placed on waivers and Jason Spezza being placed on waivers was created because of the Nick Robertson injury on Saturday night. And this is not just a league thing. This is like a league wide thing for these teams like Tampa and Vegas who are just on just by the hair of their chin, they're cap compliant. One injury, Robertson, who I don't know whether he can go on LTIR because he's out for 4 weeks. That threw everything with the Leafs into a kerfuffle because he doesn't come off their salary. He's on IR, but his salary counts.
Right.
They can replace him with a $700,000 player, but they had to waive Dell and they had to waive Spezza, and Spezza's agent had to come out and say he's not playing anywhere else other than Toronto to get him to go through waivers.
That was the weirdest thing, man. Waiving a guy.
No, I think.
No, I know what you're saying, but everybody knew that about even before Spezza's agent had to say that was the case.
Well, you could have had some team. I don't know if you increase the chances of some team being spiteful, like Montreal or Ottawa, and saying we're going to claim them just to piss you off, Toronto. But they didn't do that.
It's too early in the season for that.
Right.
Yeah, everybody's got their problems. People have too much worry, too much.
If one guy goes down on Tampa or one guy goes down on Vegas, they could have to waive one or two players just to be cap compliant. It's really
if you're close to the cap, you're in trouble. You got to really. If you're close to the cap, you're going to have these situations. It's just going to happen. You're going to lose. You're going to lose points because of it. There's no way about it. It's going to happen. And I agree. It is a really interesting situation. When I saw those guys going waivers, and Dell, knew he'd get picked up.
Yeah.
Well, the Devils had to get a goalie.
If the worst goaltender in the National Hockey League over the last 5 years, Anton Forsberg,
he got picked up.
Anybody's got pads.
He got picked up and then waived again, though, didn't he? Forsberg got picked up and then waived.
Yeah, no, he got claimed twice.
Yeah. Right.
He got claimed twice already.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some teams that are really bad right now, just for a second, because
Chicago.
We got to start with Chicago. They are really bad. I watched the game last night, and then, of course, to be fair, they had to deal with Tampa the first 2 games. That's not easy. That's a tough sell. But then,
do you think it'll get better?
Yeah, they could have played a little bit.
Or Malcolm Subban? I don't.
As I say, Malcolm Subban and Colin Delia sort of gave you an idea of where they were going.
Yeah,
-10 already in goal differential in 3 games. That's scary, no
Taves, no Dak. I mean, it was fairly apparent right away they were going to struggle. And we also talked about the goaltending this summer when they let Crawford go, which turned out not to be a move that was going to be a big change because Crawford may have ended up retiring anyway. But we were very questioning of Subban and Delia between the pipes, and we've been borne out to be 100% correct so far.
Yeah. Kind of surprised they didn't pick up Dell. They could have.
I don't think they're going to pick up anybody. I think they're looking at their team like, hey, you know what? We just need some guys to produce and, keep moving the needle forward with the young guys. I think they're going to lose Patrick Kane the next year or two anyhow.
That's a big question, right? Because guy like Patrick Kane is not going to want to handle this for very long. And
Russ, I think they're setting themselves up for Matt Beniers or Owen Power as one of the top picks in the draft.
Yeah, or Eklund, although nobody has seen Eklund play in a long time, but he's good. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part of it also depends on how long Taves is going to be out, right? I mean, if Taves misses the entire season, or if, God forbid, this is career-threatening, that has a material impact, especially what ends up happening with Kane, and may make more likely for them to attempt to try to deal Kane rather than him hanging around for 2 years on a team that's completely rebuilding.
Well, they're in a weird spot too because I don't think Taves is a huge fan of Jeremy Colliton's, and Colliton is signing an extension. And when they hired him, it was that kind of ruffled all the feathers of the veterans in the first place because most of them were like, "Hey, wait a minute, we're older than this guy. What's going on?" Right. And it seemed to send the signal up. 2 years ago? That they were on the road to doing a full rebuild. I know everybody wants to rebuild on the fly, but let's be real here. You got Kane at 33, Taves is 34, Keith is in his mid 30s. I mean, this is exactly how it went down for the Red Wings not that long ago when their run was done. So
we've seen the blueprint.
Well, so I mean it's coming, but at the same point, at what point do guys like Kane and Taves and Keith decide like, all right, that's enough? Send us somewhere else.
You haven't mentioned Seabrook, who literally played that first scrimmage on the ice and hasn't been back. We don't even know what his status is going to be.
Right.
Well, I mean, the thing is, and we talked about this before the season when we looked at Chicago. I mean, we don't know what's going on with Taves still. We don't know how long this is going to be. I hope it's not career threatening because he's been a great player.
Yeah, me too.
If he comes back, if Kane, they're going to want out. There's no way. I don't think there's any way that a team out there who is interested in Patrick Kane and interested in Taves can take them at a $10.5 million clip. Yeah. Chicago is going to have to retain salary or take salary back in deals to make that work. And I just don't know how that's going to – I mean, Joe, do you think the Buffalo Sabres – I mean, there's always been talk about the Buffalo Sabres being interested in Patrick Kane. I don't think Patrick Kane wants to come to Buffalo, but, there are other teams that would be definitely interested, but not at 10.5.
I don't know. I think Kane for maybe the end of his career. Maybe he's thinking about it. I mean, he's got a couple more years left on that deal.
2 more after this year,
2 more, yeah. So I don't know if you're Buffalo, do you throw a Jeff Skinner at Chicago and say, "Hey, listen, we know what's going on here."
Here, Kane wants to retire in Cheektowaga, and we'll give you a Skinner.
Just
nobody wants to retire in Cheektowaga.
But I mean, if you're Kane, you just want to just kind of like cruise into the end of your career and just sit at home with your folks. I don't know. I mean, he's a dad now, so I don't know if he wants to do that. But but I mean, I don't know. If you're Kane, you can basically pick wherever you want to go at this point. Honestly, I mean, he can still produce offensively. He's not going to play like a defense. I mean, that's fine. But if he's scoring you 60, 70 points a year, who cares? That's where you're at with him. But I mean, the writing's on the wall for Chicago. Like this is, I mean, they were very fortunate last year to draw Edmonton in the bubble and be able to kind of use another team that gets kicked around to advance into the playoffs. But I mean, it's pretty clear this is getting to the end. I mean, Delia and Subban and Kevin Lankinen are not guys that are going to get you deep.
No.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of those Edmonton Oilers, Zach.
Let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers for a second. Okay, so go ahead, Mike.
A 5-1 loss to the Montreal Canadiens after losing to Vancouver and then coming back again. The pattern has been firmly established. If Draisaitl and McDavid score like gangbusters, they'll win. If they're pedestrian, they're so bad defensively and their goaltending is so hideous that they cannot win. And that's what's happened in 2 of the 3 games. Now they got screwed more than any team on this Aaron Dell thing because they wanted to claim him. They apparently filed a claim, but New Jersey was ahead of them. Right now they have no backup goaltender because Mike Smith is on LTIR. They lost Forsberg on waivers. Are they going to call up David Ayers? Because I think he's probably their next goalie call.
I want to ask a legit question. We understand that Ken. No, I mean,
as opposed to an illegitimate question.
We'll be the judge of that after you ask the question.
Is this more on Edmonton, Russ? You want to?
Yes, more on Edmonton. Where? When we heard that Ken Holland gave Jimmy Howard a call, did Jimmy Howard retire because he looked at the situation and said, I know near the end of the career, anyhow, this isn't worth it. Like, I wonder if a better team had asked him, would he have played? I still wonder that.
That's a long haul for him, man. I don't know if he's still living upstate New York or if he's living in Michigan, but you're talking having to take at least 2 weeks off to quarantine and then go up and play. So that's a long haul. That's a long trip away to have to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's early days for Edmonton still, obviously, for this season. It's hard to sit back and say What
you can't say it in absolute like Mike does. You're right about that.
But early on we saw one really good game by them, two pretty lousy games by them. It's for sure. I mean, Montreal again. I'm way more impressed with Montreal than I thought I'd be. Everybody was right and I was wrong because I was like, I don't think Montreal's. I mean, it's early still for them too, but I didn't think Montreal was a legitimate threat yet. But they seem to be, I've been impressed by them as well. I think you got to see things go on. Go ahead, Jan.
I don't think we're going to really get a sense, as you guys said earlier, 5 to 7 games, right? No preseason, no exhibition games. Guys are getting their. I mean, we've talked about this, right? Herb Brooks, legs feed the wolf, right? So guys don't have their legs yet. Skating, running time, 20-minute periods when you have scrimmages in camp is not the same, even with hitting as you would in a regular game. And you've gone literally from 0 to 60 without really stopping in between. And guys aren't necessarily in the kind of shape. Although one thing I will say, I happened to watch the overtime the other night. Mr. Kaprizov looks absolutely
he's phenomenal.
What he was doing in overtime the other night was ridiculous. I mean, the goal by Johansson was a knuckle puck that got the game winner over quick, but just every time he got the puck, you can kind of see the LA defenseman backing up a little bit to give him room because they knew just how dangerous he was in the offensive zone.
Yeah, him for the last few years, and I expected nothing less, honestly.
Okay, 2 or 3 games is too small of a window to draw conclusions, but Columbus is 0-2, and right now the Dubois thing is hanging over their head. Really, I mean, I don't know if the two are connected. I
changed that because that Kukalainen, he's not going to move him this year. I've been told that, and I'm pretty darn. I mean, I don't think he has. I mean, he has him for 2 years, and he has control of him after that. He's not going to give him up, and this year there's not much benefit. Like if they were trying to sell tickets and they were playing this poorly, I think that would change things. But this year, without having to sell tickets, really, honestly, they can be bad even. And
but do they want to be bad? I don't think so.
But I'm saying they can be. They don't have to be everything that you want to be.
And do they want a guy? I mean, I'm not saying he's not going to try. I'm not going to attack Dubois. But do you want a guy who clearly doesn't want to be there, and maybe if he's moping around and saying that okay, I'm just gonna play. I'm gonna play, be a professional. I'm gonna play my games. I'm gonna do whatever. But if he clearly doesn't want to be there, that doesn't have a positive effect, Joe, on the team. I think that if you can find a deal that helps both teams and brings guys that they can retain long term, that might be a deal that Columbus does, because they're practiced at this. They lost Panarin, they lost Bobrovsky. They can't lose Dubois in a couple of years for nothing. They have to move him while they can and get good value for him.
Yeah, and I question what it does to the room. I mean, there's the whole locker room aspect to it where guys have to really lean on each other twice as hard now, given what the status is on road games. Like you're basically hunkered down with each other, and if you got a guy that's just kind of that you already know, and guys understand it. Like guys are just kind of like, it's business, we understand, but it's hey man, you signed here, you're with us, you gotta play. And if it's to a point where it's obvious that he's just he's checked out, and I mean he's an interesting kid. I mean he's very likable, he's very nice. And he doesn't strike me as the kind of player that would just kind of sort of mail it in that.
I don't think he's doing that, Joe. I think Jarmo handled it exactly right. I think Torts needs to rethink his strategy about airing everything out like he did early on. I don't think that was good for the team. I think it was detrimental. Dubois wasn't saying a word. The GM wasn't saying a word. But now all of a sudden Torts had to. And felt like he had to, and it's why?
I remember Dubois and Panarin are best of friends. Those guys are tight as could be. Panarin wasn't a problem playing it out there at all. He knew he was going to leave, but Panarin he was their best player right until he left.
Right.
No, but Torts didn't call out Panarin, Eck. he didn't do it at all. He didn't talk about Panarin.
And Panarin had, Panarin was well within his rights to leave. He was an unrestricted free agent, and he played great up until the last minute he played in Columbus.
Yeah.
In this instance, Dubois has got 2 more years, and then 2 more years after that before he's a UFA, and already he's saying, I want out. And that's where I think, honesty exactly is not the best policy when it comes to Tortorella, because he's opened this can of worms up for everybody to see.
I think he did it. Yeah, that's exactly.
But remember, the organization decided both with Panarin and Bobrovsky that they were going to play it out. They were going to see if they can make one more run, because they knew both of those guys were going to be unrestricted free agents, and the return they would have gotten for them would have been a lot less than maybe for a guy like Dubois, who's young, who's retainable for several more years. Look, not the ideal in terms of coming out honestly, but I think everybody kind of knew what the situation was based upon the fact that he took so long to sign.
Now, Patrick Laine also same kind of situation, but he's doing great in Winnipeg. So it's a tough thing.
He's out right now with the UBI.
Out tonight with the UBI. He's not playing tonight.
Right, comes in the first game, and looked amazing. So it's like, I think that
but he's singing for his supper. He wants a new deal, and the problem is Winnipeg is not going to be able to pay him the kind of money he's looking for. So that's, he could score 30 goals in 56 games, and it's not going to change the fact that he wants out of Winnipeg, because Winnipeg is not going to pay him. So I wanted to ask Joe about last night, because I thought this theater that we saw in Florida regarding Keith Yandle, he's not going to be in the lineup. He's not going to be in the lineup. Now he's in the lineup. No, he scores a goal. I mean, honestly, I don't know why I don't know if it's Quenneville. I don't know if it's management. I don't know what's going on in terms of why a guy who's a really good offensive defenseman would not play, other than they want him to play a type of game that this is like a Skinner thing. He's never going to play defense. This is Keith Yandle. Keith Yandle doesn't play defense. He scores points.
But he's good at offense.
It's more than that, though. They told him right off the bat, immediately, like as the last year ended, to go someplace else. He has a no movement clause. So unless he gives them a place that he'll go, they can't talk to anybody about a trade. So that's a problem. They apparently did give a couple places, and those places weren't willing to take him. They're also, is the situation that they're trying to do in Minnesota today. They're trying to create a new locker room presence. He was an assistant captain last year, had an A on his shirt last year. And he, that team last year was really not a healthy situation in the room, apparently, from all accounts. They were too happy-go-lucky. They didn't take things seriously enough for what Quenneville wanted, right?
Well, that's fair. That's been their MO for a lot of years,
right? And Yandle is, he's a good guy. He's a nice guy, and I think that they wanted somebody. They wanted more competitiveness out of their assistant guy. I think they just wanted more anger in general. They wanted somebody who would get pissed off at losing more, and I think that
they can hire me then.
What was that?
They can hire me then.
Yeah, but so the situation is right that yet at the end of the day. Yandle wasn't playing well last year for them. Wasn't playing well in the bubble. Wasn't playing well. Last night he comes in and plays really well. We all have watched hockey long enough to know that that's going to happen, right? If Yandle's going to be in the lineup, I would have told you he scored a goal without even looking at the box score, because that's just the way it goes, right? Like, he's not going to play. He's not going to play. He's not going to play. Then he's in. Okay, he's going to score.
Well, you know what that is, though. That's Quenneville saying, like, well, if none of you guys are going to be a hard ass and step up about it, I'll be the hard ass.
Exactly.
I'll be the guy. If you guys aren't going to step up and scream at each other, well, get pissed off at me. Then in that case, I'm going to sit the guy with the longest consecutive game streak and the guy that you love. Well, if I'm going to sit him, how are you guys going to respond?
Right. But
way to do it.
I look at it. Whether the team does want him to go and whether he wants to not stay because of family or whatever is well within his right. And so at the end of the day, alienating your best or second best offensive defenseman doesn't make any sense, because, yes, on the bench, you might get a little better defense, but now you're screwing up your offense just to prove a point. And what is that really going to do?
I think what it did, and watching, because they have a lot of new guys in that lineup, they have a lot of new players in there. Mm-hmm. I think what it did last night watching that game was give them, like Joe says, a common enemy in Quenneville, that they were pissed off that this was happening to Yandle. Right. They didn't like it. At the end of the day, it didn't happen to Yandle. All the talk we can talk about. At the end of the day, he's streaks going. He still played. He scored. He had played a regular shit. And he looked great. Was this a ploy by Quenneville the whole time? I don't think so. But I also think that it worked out for him in that way. And I think it brought the team closer together, a team that desperately needs to be closer together. Like this.
Hey, look, I remember when the Carlos Straskins Ironman streak, ended. It's going to end at some point.
Yeah, and that's a tough spot to be.
What are you smiling about, Mike? He was the previous Ironman. Give him some respect.
And what about when Larmer's ended? Didn't Steve Larmer's end because of the trade request that he had made years ago? Wasn't that the reason why?
Because of questionable suspension, right? So Cogliano's was a questionable suspension that happened.
Yeah.
But this is the thing though. It's a page out of the old Mike Keenan book, except it plays out way more in public. When Keenan was doing this stuff in the 80s and the 90s, it was just, you're reading about it, after he left town. In this case, you're just seeing it right out in front because Yandle's a Boston guy. Boston guys have some of the biggest personality in the league, and everybody loves them. So, yeah, it's it would be like taking Cal Ripken aside and being like, hey, you know what? We don't like you anymore. We're just going to sit you down, for no good reason.
Some coaches are good about that and will tell the player ahead of time what's going on, and they'll say, I'm going to be hard on you and I'm going to do this, and that happens too. But in this situation, I think that it was legitimate that they didn't think Yandle was playing well. But I also, the more I dug into it leading up to it, I wasn't surprised that he played because I kept hearing, well, the streak still hasn't ended, has it? Basically everybody was acting like it had ended, but it hasn't, and it hadn't ended.
Okay, but look at this group of defensemen. Yeah. It's Yandle, Ekblad, Strawman, who's definitely past it, Mackenzie Weegar, Forsling, Nudavara. Like, you need Keith Yandle there. You have one other guy with any offensive ability at all, and that's Aaron Ekblad. Otherwise, you have no offensive ability there on your entire blue line.
Yeah. Are you expecting Radko Gudas to jump into the offense?
Right.
It's not going to happen.
I don't disagree, and I was baffled by it. And I listening to but it was interesting how much steam it gained. Like I listened to,
I know.
Was it gosh.
But while you're thinking of it, I could see if a young guy was pushing for Yandle's job, that would be one thing. There's nobody pushing for Yandle's job there.
Right. This is like, if you want to change the internal workings of your team, like Bill Guerin did in Minnesota, you do it in the off season. You say to Yandle, okay, we want to trade you, and if he has a no move clause and you won't waive it, then you're pretty much stuck until you make him suffer during the year, and then you ask him to waive the no move clause and to go to Seattle on expansion. But he signed an extension there to stay in Florida. That's the thing. It's like Jeff Skinner signed an extension to stay in Buffalo. They expect to be able to play the role that they were signed to do. And then all of a sudden, the coach wants them to be a completely different player, and they're not that player.
Right, and they're not going to wait for them. They're not going to do that.
But I think that we're all buying it hook, line, and sink.
Well, what are we supposed to do? A guy does that. Everybody bought it hook, line, and sinker because the coach is serious. It's Joel Quenneville. All of a sudden, we don't look at him as a guy that plays too many games.
And Joel,
it is serious. And I heard Shane Doan. Shane Doan's the guy I was trying to think of. Shane Doan come on XM and be like, freaking out about this. Shane Doan handles the best teammate I've ever had. He's the greatest guy in the world. And all this stuff. And Shane Doan is one of those guys that everybody respects, thinks is beyond.
Absolutely
right. Well, Joe. I mean, and it's not like Joel. Guys who don't play in their own end. Brian Campbell played for him for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's value with guys like that. But the thing is, the Campbell's situation in Chicago is a lot different than it is with Yandle in Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, you pointed out there's not a lot of guys to lean on in Chicago that you can say well, he's got Nicholas Yarmelson with him. He's fine. They paired Yandle up with Gudas, which hey, if you want to have a defensive only guy to pair him with, that's probably the guy to go with. But
Gudas isn't the guy to go with only because he will stray. He will do some things that make you scratch your head. He can play good defense, but there's at least 3 or 4 times in the game where probably Yandle looked back and Gudas wasn't there either.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to go to make those hits, and he's gonna do his thing. But but Florida doesn't have that wealth of riches Chicago did. So his role is similar to that of Campbell's, but it's a very different situation.
I mean, I think Gudas doesn't. The thing about Gudas, I think we put him on there because he doesn't let Yandle take his shift off. Like Gudas is going to drive Yandle crazy throughout the game because he's going to talk about. You're going to get back to the bench, and Yandle's going to have to talk about everything he did to Gudas every shift. And that's the kind of thing that, a guy like Yandle doesn't want to do, because he takes all kinds of liberties. But Gudas is going to keep him, and I'm sure Quenville said to him, keep him to the fire, keep him to the fire. And at the end of the day, Florida's 1-0, and Yandle scored a goal, and that's really as far as I see it. I mean, yeah, you could say they toyed with Keith Yandle, but maybe they needed to get Keith Yandle a little bit more serious about this. Maybe. He's making a lot of money living in Florida and just having a great old time. You have to, it's hard.
Well, I have a lot of Panthers that did that.
Oh, I know, but those Panthers can't keep them there, or else they won't be a good team. I mean, but you're right. I mean, gosh, tons of Panthers have done that, and that's always been an issue with that team and with Phoenix the same way.
If nobody on the roster is going to push them for a spot, well, you have to make it known that you could lose your spot to anybody, and you better step on the gas.
Right, and Yandle played in Arizona to Phoenix too, right? So he's had to play in a couple of these like cushy type places to play hockey. Of course, he also played in New York, so there.
In New York, where he was highly criticized.
So for him not wanting to move into the movement clause, not super surprising. I think that it was definitely questionable as to how it happened, but at the end of the day, they didn't screw up that badly.
It all worked out.
The Predators, 2-0, and then we talked about the opposite end of Columbus. Okay, the Predators, of course, had the 2 games against Columbus.
Yeah, and Minnesota 2-0.
Yeah,
I think it's extremely impressive, but I think that's primarily to do with Kaprizov because he's been so good.
And it's the Kings and the overtime games, right? So
I think Ryan Suter has something to do with it too, Mike. He's fantastic too. No, I mean he was a big deal on the second win.
I'll tell you who looked good in those Kings games, which is really surprising for me to say, but was Jeff Carter actually looked good in both games.
Yeah, he did look good. I agree.
And if he plays like that, that's a difference maker for LA. I mean, if he still has that in his game, which I didn't know he necessarily did, but when he looks like he's in shape and he looks bulkier and bigger than he's looked in his up on his skates more than he's been in a while.
I honestly think they're the number one team to get Dubois too, because they're the team that's loaded with all the centers. I think they could trade like Velarde, a draft pick, and another prospect for Dubois, and I think that might be enough. They have the salary cap space, so I think I would keep an eye on LA.
And he's sort of
no, I don't think they would trade Turcotte. No.
Okay.
The funny thing about that is so the real word out there is that Dubois wants to play for the Rangers and Laine wants to play for the Kings, right? And that's pretty much known. Now, whether in my history of knowing the New York Rangers, Jan and Russ, when someone says they want to play for the Rangers, they end up playing for the Rangers. Like the Rangers,
but not always going to trade though. That's the thing. And right now, you're talking about probably the chintziest GM trade-wise that the Rangers have had in at least a decade, maybe 2 decades. Well, definitely 2 because of Glenn Sader. So in a very long time. And I don't think they're going to give up massive assets to do it. And I think that's going to be the problem. He may want to go there, but I think the Rangers are going to lowball him.
Yeah, I mean, they might, but that's
but he clearly feels a need, right? He would immediately slot into that second line center slot.
Yeah.
Right next to Panarin, who he wants to play with.
I think look,
he's a relatively cost-contained price for the next 2 years. Obviously, after that, it's going to spike. But at that point in time, you also have Zibanejad's contract coming up, and he's going to be due for a massive uplift in pay, given what he's making now.
Right. I can see Kravtsov being offered. Will that be enough? I don't know, but I could see him being offered.
Well, that's the thing, Joe. I mean, if you're talking about LA, you're talking about Turcotte. If you're talking about Montreal, you're talking either Suzuki or Kotkaniemi. If you're talking to the Rangers, it's going to be Kakko or Kravtsov or some, one of their high level prospects. They're not. These teams are not going to get Dubois for a first round pick and a prospect.
Yeah,
that's why I said Kravtsov, Mike, because he is doing well in the KHL. He's not with the Rangers, so they won't lose anything. They might be willing to do that, and somebody else or a pick or whatever, and and maybe that happens. It's possible.
But these sorts of deals, I think, when we talk about a deal for a guy like Dubois, though, I think that changes the whole aspect of what you do, just because of all the cost control. And the years that you've got before he gets to jump, you're talking about a guy that you basically have for the next 3 to 4 years.
Right, that's why I'm saying
he's going to spike though. Remember, it's 5 years, 2 years. Then he's an RFA with Arbright, so it's going to spike probably into the at least $8 million range because the cap's going to rise a little bit over that point in time, right? And you're looking at Zibanejad. if you resign him, you're looking at somewhere in the $10 million range also for him. Though at that point in time, Strom's deal is going to be up, so you get to balance some of this off anyway.
No, but Joe makes a good point, and that's why I'm saying the Rangers offer, no matter what, is going to seem like a low ball offer anyhow.
Yeah. So I mean, like, do you do a Kravtsov and a Hedl? You know, and
I mean, I've heard so many permutations. I've heard Hedl and Kakko. I've heard Hedl a number one in one of their young defensemen, right? So look, young potential number 1, 2 centers don't necessarily grow on trees, and a guy who's already been productive in the league, who you expect to have increased growth, to be a 75-point, 80-point guy potentially down the road. Columbus is rightly going to expect a massive return based upon his age and based upon the controllability they have with him. It's not like they're giving him up with a year to go. They would be giving him up with 3+ years to go in terms of RFAs, in terms of being able to hold on to him with arb rights.
And I think the fact that you have JD as the president of the Rangers and Kekalainen and the relationship that they had in Columbus could help grease the wheels in terms of a deal getting done. I'm not saying that means they're going to get him for a song, because I think it's pretty.
I think there's something to it, but I think the real key here is, can the Rangers re-sign Zibanejad? If they can't, then they might push for a deal like this, and they might explore it. If they can, then they're not going to be desperate for it.
Yeah, but the question is if Hedl really could be a number 2 center. I think
I think we'll learn.
So if he can't, you're still in dire need of a number 2 center.
Well, it might be Kravtsov. You don't know.
He's not a center, in my opinion. He's a wing.
It's Ryan Strome. We know it's Ryan Strome.
For now.
Now it's Ryan Strome. That's
for the short term, Mike.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. I really do think that you're dealing with a GM in Kukalainen who's not going to move him unless he's blown away. And I think
so then he's probably going to keep him.
I think he's probably going to keep him. I think that's in likelihood what's going to happen. You also have to look at selling tickets next year. They have to make sure they have something there to sell tickets. You know, it basically is more important than this year, because this year there's no upside. You know,
right? No, I get that. There's a lot of truth to that.
So, and it matters to people right now. So I think that's going to be fascinating. Well, that's all the time we got, guys. It was a quick show as always when Joe is here. And thank you very much for joining us. And
which means it's laborious when me and Russ and Shannon are here.
Endless.
We were just letting it sit out there, Mike. It was the unsaid.
It was the unsaid until.
Well, I have to say it.
You know, like how many? Like in order to see my clock, I know how good a show is by this. Like in order to see my clock, I have to pull down like a certain thing in the top of my thing. And I didn't do it till it was 2:08 today. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. Sometimes I do it at 1:34. Like it's different.
It's 1:03 and the show's just started. Next check is
oh man, 1:34. Yeah, but 2:08. I'm like, wow, 2:08. That's pretty cool. All right, guys. Enjoy the games tonight. I'll see you down there, Russ.
See you, Mike.
Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. We will talk to you